open and honest process, but let's be blunt, it's never been one. I've been through a lot of NEPA processes. I've never seen one where we go, I don't care about the scoping, where normally everybody gets to come in and say what they think they should look at. We're going to pick our own hand-picked group and let them be the people, and then we're not going to listen to them either. I'm sort of apoplectic, but you always think you've seen it all, then you see something like this. So that really got my attention right away. Then another thing, my organization discovered, I worked with Superfund issues, the Motorola site, and we found there were all these chemicals in the air that, where were they coming from? Back in 2005, we released in 2006, there's something called the Joint Air Toxics Assessment Program. This was an air monitoring done by DEQ and EPA about different sites in the metro area. This is part of a national program, by the way, to determine what kind of chemicals are in the air here. Now we already know that we have particulate matter and other things here like ozone that are a problem. Well, I was shocked to find out there are parts of the Phoenix metro area where there are chemicals, known carcinogens in the air above the official EPA action standard. And you notice there's no action. One of those perennial problems. Well, in particular, let me kind of show you over here. And that information is posted on the Don't Waste Arizona website. Right about here on the Gila River Indian community was St. John's as one of the monitoring sites. And one of the conclusions that are in there are high levels of chemicals that are associated with transportation exhaust at above the federal recommended limit here already. Well, now, we have a real unusual formation here at South Mountain. We have the Estrellas. We have a little wind tunnel here. So as the prevailing winds bring air this way, it tends to kind of sit here and not get through that pass. So they've always had high levels of sulfur dioxide and other chemicals there. People always wonder what's going on. Long and short of it is, there's this thing called the straw that broke the camel's back. You've all heard that story. So if you already have high levels of chemicals here associated with transportation, it would have to come from the freeway or the traffic in Ahwatukee. Adding more pollution? Well, duh, what will that do? So, and on this side, there's other issues too, but it was very clear. In fact, there's an article that we got published in Good Hills News to remind people that our tax dollars paid for this. That's not in here. It's not in the draft. In fact, there's this whole long psychobabble about, well, we don't really know, but this really tells us that these standards are not really set. Well, no, they are. And I had the luxury of having the EPA's toxicologist, Jerry Hyatt, walk through all this information at a Superfund meeting. There is a standard that is set, what they call an acceptable cancer risk. I'm never for that. Okay, I say we should just like as little as possible. I don't want more, you know. But this is not included. It becomes real evident when you go through this thing that anything that might be a negative or that stop the cheerleading for this thing, we're not going to include that. But that's a glaring error. I mean, how could you not include this data? After all, it came out in 2006. It's not like it's recent. So that was one that really jumped out at me and raises real issues. Now, the next thing I looked at, and by the way, this document that's on the chair is something I put together, and I'm encouraging people when they write their comments to include that, because the more there is in the administrative record where people said, well, what about this, 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 and this, and anything else that you can possibly think of, because we're not omniscient, put that in there. Then there's the risk from hazardous materials incidents. Now, as a member of the local emergency planning committee, I had to help write an emergency plan for Maricopa County, which I'm not happy with because I'm only one of 20 people, and it was watered down significantly. Long and short about emergency planning, first of all, we have a report that tells us what chemicals are stored in your community. Other than gas stations, is not allowed here in Ahwatukee. I think you probably know that there's no manufacturing base. One of the enforcement cases I did was against a company here that was releasing toxic chemicals into your air, and after I sued them, they stopped. Okay, that was in the 90s. So as a member of the local emergency planning committee, I can see all this reports. You have a right to know that information too, but you have to ask for each facility. Good luck with that. So when you look at that, we say, well, there isn't a risk here now, and there certainly isn't anything other than gasoline and diesel being trucked along Pecos Road. You bring this freeway through here, then anything can happen. And we've had serious chemical incidents involved at truck companies here, where the fire department got there and found out there were chemicals there that no one ever told them they were going to run into. Okay. But the worst thing that can happen, and you'll go on my website, chemicals spilled outdoor, it's up on the ward. That was created with an EPA grant or something called a common sense initiative. Everything you'd ever want to know about emergency planning, didn't want to know to ask. I investigated a chlorine disaster in Graniteville, South Carolina. Eventually wound up giving a presentation to the New York State Fire Training Academy about chlorine hazards, and have been trying to get the city of Phoenix to do something about its chlorine hazards here. Nonetheless, if you have a truck, 15-ton tanker truck, it's a typical size, there's an incident here on the freeway, even if we're on a grid alignment, which is not on the table, you have a matter of minutes before that comes in this direction. Now, I just ran the model, and it shows it going 6 miles from the source in a matter of minutes. The largest cul-de-sac in the world, I think, is called Awatuki. Isn't that what that really means? There's no way you're going to get out of here. And you've got schools and all these things that have been built all these years, and they're going to be at risk. The scary thing about chlorine, when you have enough of it released, it infiltrates into buildings. You've heard of shelter-in-place and other strategies, but you've only got a few minutes. Now, there's no mention of any of this in the draft environmental impact study. You could have knocked me over with a feather. They're in there talking about, well, we might run into some contaminated soils as we dig. And like, that's not hazardous materials. That's like a problem. But you could kill people. You could injure them. In Graniteville, South Carolina, the responders, this happened at 3 o'clock in the morning, a couple of trains, a train hit another train and cracked open a chlorine rail car. And fortunately, a lot of it didn't come out. But the firefighters and responders that came down that were very, very trained forgot to put on their protective gear. And they all wound up in the hospital. So there wasn't anyone to do anything for anybody. Okay? Phoenix Fire is going to be telling you, because they're told to tell people this, well, we'll respond. You can't stop. You get a big enough hole on these tankers, all you can do is wait for it to bleed out and blow away. And good luck who gets exposed to it. So those are real serious impacts. It will change the culture of this town, of Awatuki. It would be something you'd have to have drills in the schools and plants, and a place like this, right next to Pecos Road, are you kidding me? You'd be at risk here too. You'd have to have some sort of a notification system and community training, and on it goes. Not to mention, that's a really serious glaring error, and I know people have raised that issue since the beginning of all this, which I think should tell you the pattern that's going on with this thing. But it's inexcusable, okay? They do know what comes over the border from Mexico, and they do know some of the truck traffic and what's in it, but a lot of times they don't. So the fire department shows up and tries to respond to a chlorine disaster. There's not much they can do, and we probably don't have enough body bags around the city to take care of them. Then there's more air quality issues. Let me walk back over here. Now, we have a system of air monitoring that helps us determine if we exceed the federal standards. And the monitor that has the most exceedances is here at 43rd Avenue and Broadway. There used to be one a little bit further this way, but the Santa Gravel industry wanted it moved because their friends were getting violations. At any rate, right now you probably heard there's this big discussion about losing $1 billion worth of highway funds because we haven't met the PM standard, particularly matter standards. It's this monitor that's having almost all of those violations. the straw that broke the camel's back. You put a freeway here, about a mile upwind or so, it's going to add pollution. Well, you're going to have the most expensive freeway ever built in America. Because besides what it costs to build it, you're going to lose $1 billion worth of highway funds. And not just once. We keep having violations, we're going to have more billions that we don't have. No discussion of this at all in this draft environmental impact study. Further, you would have to dig up a lot of sand and gravel in order to build this freeway. And all that dust that gets kicked up is going to blow over this monitor. So even during construction, you're going to have a problem. Right now, the state is trying to convince EPA that the 13 exceedances were all caused by dust storms. I don't think they're going to get all of them classified as weather-related. And if that happens, we could stand to lose the $1 billion. But part of the reason the EPA didn't sanction us before was the truck bypass idea. So you're going to negate all this public policy and all these decisions that actually involve the Arizona legislature. No mention of that. One of the reasons I wanted to put this document together was to let people really understand how grossly deficient and inadequate this thing is. And these are just like the top things that hit me. Another thing that this lady brought up, the wells that are going to be taken out, they're going to talk about that during the design phase, if at all. Well, that's not the right time in the process. But it's been real evident that ADOT has always planned to just run this little game on this and never really do the process that they're supposed to do. After my initial, where's the meat, where's the substance of this thing, I had this washed over me a tremendous sense of relief. Because I thought, oh, they've been really working on this, and this is going to be really a formidable document. And no, it's not. I've seen a lot of draft and final environmental impact studies. The studies that examine the chance of accidents, the impacts, the transportation of hazmat, I have seen them in many of them. Now, they spent $20 million on this thing. I, as a taxpayer, want my money back. And that would be real questions. This consulting firm that they have used, they've done this in other places, so what happened? It would give me the impression that someone at ADOT said, oh, we don't want you to look at that, which is, besides being unprofessional, might be illegal. If we had an honest attorney general, it would be investigated, I think. Let me get on to the next thing. That is the blasting in South Mountain. Now, I sat down, God help me, and read all the correspondence that goes back and forth. And the Gila River Indian community has stated over and over and over and over again that this is their sacred mountain. Now, and that blasting it or taking away part of it is not a good thing. They don't really want that to happen. And I'm thinking, okay, this to me is real simple. I'm in Rome, and they wanted to build another road. They said, well, we have to take out part of the Sistine Chapel, hope you don't mind. We would go, no, you're not going to do that. That's a terrible idea. You would never think of doing that. Well, this is religious and racial discrimination. Now, there may be not anything strong in the laws that would help that issue, but it is what it is, okay? It's not at all appropriate. And it isn't like they haven't politely said, excuse me, but that is just not what we want you to do. I've seen, one of the things that I've worked on through the years is environmental justice. In fact, I helped organize some of the first conferences with something called the Commission on the Arizona Environment to talk about that, to explore it. And this is a clear example of environmental injustice. Now, there is, by the way, an environmental justice section in this, and much to my astonishment, they claim that they've reached out and talked to every single EJ group that there is in the affected area. And I'm thinking, I started calling all my EJ friends, and none of them were ever contacted. In fact, some of them tried to connect with ADOT to talk about their concerns, and no one returned their phone call. And that was kind of the end of it. And when we go to filing comments, I'm going to get some affidavits from them about that. So the purpose of what I'm saying here is to let you know this thing is grossly deficient. And despite the propaganda efforts to say, oh, everybody's for this, I noticed that the Arizona Republic came out and said, oh, this is the best thing ever. Let's go for that freeway. They were for the refinery. They were for the toxic waste incinerator. They're for everything that nobody normally would want. So I'm kind of used to that. I know that Park tried to reach out to them, and they never returned their phone calls. So they're not going to be your friend in all of this. But it's okay. It doesn't really matter. What really matters is raising the money to get the experts to say what has to be said. And the way this stuff works is we know the sky is blue, right? But we need an expert to say that for it to count. Because when it comes to litigation, they're going to say, well, our experts say this. And we have to say, well, ours say something different. And through the years, I've learned how to do some of the air modeling, or at least to examine it. And this air modeling done was just as bogus as it can get. Let's exclude any and everything that might be a negative. You can't walk away from the truck emissions coming from Mexico and the additional truck traffic. And now I notice that ADOT is beginning to call it a truck bypass, which is really what was going on all along with it. But we're here now, folks. Now, I'm going to join Park, and we're not allowed to take money today, but they're going to get my check. I'm going to join again. I'm going to give $100. I know some people give more, some people give less, but it's time to tell your neighbors and friends that we can beat this thing. And let's put this thing to rest once and for all. I've been waiting for 8 years now for this pig to run out so we can club it to death, right? and we have the real opportunity to do it. The first time I ever did a NEPA lawsuit was to stop the ENSCO toxic waste incinerator project. The next time I did one, in fact, Sierra Club, Sonora North, and Don't Waste Arizona hired Howard Schenker, and we won. Okay, we took on the city of Phoenix, so they don't like me for that. At any rate, the good thing about the NEPA process is that it says you have to do all these things, and you have to do them right. And here's our chance to get a record of decision that says no build. Once and for all, skip it. We're done with it, and no more. Thank you.